I'm going to tell you about ADHD decluttering tips that have changed my life that you can use right now. Now, with ADHD, we tend to start one thing, and as we're doing that one thing, we think of something else, and then we go and move to the other thing and start doing that thing. And then eventually, you might come back and go ahead and do the thing that we were originally doing. And this can be a huge trap because what you're trying to do is do two things at once, and then that makes it much longer to try to get the first thing accomplished. And so when you're trying to declutter, you do not want to go ahead and declutter and then try to organize at the same time. All you're going to do is do double work because you're going to declutter and then you're going to try to organize as you're decluttering. So now you're just going through and doing double work, and you don't want to do that. So what you want to do is you actually want to go ahead and do the decluttering first, and that way when we get through with the decluttering, then you start to do the organizing. And since when you do this you're not doing double work, it's going to give you the time back that you would spend actually going back and doing something again and again and again. And here's another tip. With ADHD, we tend to forget things, that we place them and just don't remember where they are. And a lot of times what we'll do, especially like maybe you have an old piece of furniture that you have been meaning to get rid of, or you've just stored away somewhere and you've just forgotten that you actually have it. And then you just come across it later and like, wow, I have this chair or sofa or whatever kind of furniture it is. And you realize that you've been meaning to get rid of this thing, that you even bought a new chair already, but it's sitting in there and you just haven't gone through and gotten rid of it yet. And you might have just forgot about it. You might just procrastinate it to get rid of it. So with old furniture, that can be a prime candidate of something that you need to get rid of. All this old furniture is doing is sitting in your house or apartment and becoming clutter. It's one piece of something you can get rid of that is actually going to give you a whole lot of space back, and then you'll be able to use that space for something else. And here's another tip. With ADHD, we tend to end up with things that we're not exactly going to use, whether we were impulsive about it or we had this idea that would really work in our house or apartment, and then we get it home and realize it doesn't work at all, especially when we have decor that we buy and we bring into the home and say, oh, this really cool lamp would sit right here, or this chair would be good right there, or whatever else you want to decorate your house with or apartment with. But we get it home and it just sits because we never find the exact place. We had a place picked out, but it doesn't really go there. Or we thought it would go with the different colors of our apartment or house, and it doesn't really go with either. But weeks and months and maybe years go by and you haven't ever used it at all. It just sits there. And so at that point, it becomes clutter, and then we just have it in our house or apartment, and it doesn't serve a purpose at all. So if you have gone through this situation, then what you might want to do is look and see if you have unusable decor around your house, around your apartment, and figure out, can I use it? If not, you may want to go ahead and get rid of it so you can free up that space that is taken up and use it for something else. And here's another tip for you. When we have ADHD, we tend to procrastinate about a lot of different things. And this is one of them. When we have food in our pantry or refrigerator that has just expired, it's not really good anymore. Like you look at the date and you're like, it's way past its time. But it could have been hiding behind something else that you just didn't see it back there until you like go and look, and then look behind all the stuff, and then finally we figure out, oh, this is really expired. Or you find some kind of thing in your refrigerator and you kind of don't know what's in there because it's been in there for so long. In that case, you definitely want to get rid of it. Now, another thing that you can check the expiration date on is any meds that you have. And in that case, you want to contact your doctor and say, hey, I have these, they're expired. Is it okay to keep them, or should I throw them away, or what should I do with them? And then they can help you make that decision. But you want to make sure that everything that you have expired, you kind of look at and make a decision as to whether it's okay, you can keep it, or if you do need to throw it away. And this goes for anything that has an expiration date. And here's another tip for you. With ADHD, we tend to have a love and hate relationship with making lists and keeping up with them. Like we need them, but the whole process of actually doing one is just not fun and generally kind of boring. And so you actually do need one as you are decluttering, but you don't have to do everything at one time. You want to kind of brainstorm everything that you want to declutter and put that on a list. And then once you have that list, as you think of other things as you go throughout your day, and you're like, hey, I really need to declutter that, you go through and add that to the list. So let's say you're going to do your declutter on the weekend and you're trying to figure out everything you need to declutter on that weekend. So you write some stuff down and then you leave that list somewhere where you know you can find it and where you know that you'll pass by it. And that way, when you think of other things, you go by and add it to the list. So you have a running list of things throughout the whole time that you're getting ready to go and declutter. And when that day comes to declutter, then we have a list complete of everything that we want to declutter and all the things that we have remembered during the week or during the days before we actually go and do the decluttering. It's very hard to try to just remember everything on the fly. When you have a list, you can just look down it and check things off and know that you have decluttered everything that you really want to declutter. Don't have to be worried about, I have to remember everything and I don't want to forget something. If you do tend to forget something and then you think of it later, then you have a running list that you can add things to. You can also keep this list as well if you know that, hey, I'm going to head and declutter on another day as well. So I'll get through as much as I can on this list. And then as you get closer to the next time, then you take the stuff that you had on the list previously that you didn't finish and you add that to the new stuff that you actually want to declutter as well. And here's another tip. With ADHD, we tend to get excited about certain things and then we do something impulsive and buy things we don't really need at the time. And this happens with decluttering as well because we get excited about organizing and we're just, hey, I need this, I need that. I saw this cool thing on TV that I actually need. I need all these bins and boxes to make sure that I can get everything organized and decluttered. And I know I'm going to need it from now until I finish decluttering. And we go out and buy those things. And we have all these boxes and everything at our house, all these clear bins at our apartment ready to declutter. And you realize after you do declutter and you have all your stuff that you're going to keep in your bins and everything, that you just have a lot more. We just have so many more than we actually need. And that's because we went and bought them before we got through decluttering to really figure out, okay, when I'm going to organize this, how many of these boxes and everything do I actually need? If we wait till after we declutter, then you can figure that out and you'll know the exact amount. As if you do it before, then you're just kind of making a guess and hoping that you get it right. So you don't want to start doing that, buying everything to organize until you have figured out everything that you're going to declutter and everything you're actually going to keep. And then you get the boxes and bins that you actually need. And here's another tip. With ADHD, we have a tendency to think fast and think of a lot of ideas or things at once. And so that helps us to brainstorm and come up with all these different things that might be good for the situation or maybe not good for the situation, but we do get a lot of ideas. And sometimes we put those ideas into action and just like, hey, this would be wonderful to do this, but sometimes it doesn't work out the best. And this can also be the case with decluttering because you don't want to do decluttering and try to do another thing and try to do another thing all at the same time. You only want to do decluttering by itself. And so, for instance, you do not want to try to declutter and then clean at the same time. Like you don't want to start decluttering and then say, I want to go vacuum, want to make sure this room is vacuumed up, get the vacuum cleaner, start vacuuming. And then, I want to dust this area before I forget to do it. But you're in the middle of decluttering. So then you start dusting. And so now we have all these different things that we're doing, but we're not really focusing on the decluttering as we intended to in the first place. And so the decluttering kind of goes by the wayside. The vacuuming doesn't get done, the dusting doesn't get done. It's because we're trying to do all these things at once instead of just doing one thing at a time. And I realize, sometimes you just get distracted and you move from one thing to the other, but just make sure that you are just focusing on decluttering. And when you get that idea to do a lot of other things at once, just go back and say, hey, I need to really finish this one thing first, because if you don't, what happens is vacuuming and decluttering makes things longer. Doing dusting in the clutter makes things longer. Going and trying to get stuff out of the dishwasher and put the dishes up and then come back is going to make the process longer. And so to make the process shorter, you just want to make sure that you focus on just the decluttering and then move to the vacuuming or the dusting or whatever else you want to do after you declutter. And here's another tip. We have that stuff that is just so hard to let go of. It's just super sentimental. Like, you have that shirt from your favorite band and that concert that you went to 10 years ago. And it's that shirt that you just never want to get rid of. It could be like tattered, ripped to shreds, all the elastic is all out of it. And you still want to wear it and still want to keep it. And so you've gotten too sentimental over that shirt, and it's just time to probably let that shirt go. Or you have your wedding dress from 10 to 15 years ago and you have been married and you're happy and you're probably not going to get married again. And you may not even have any kids to pass the dress down to. And so it's just sitting in your closet and you just haven't gotten rid of it. We're just holding on to the dress or the tuxedo or the suit that we wore at the wedding so long ago. And why are we keeping it? We do want to remember that time, and it's good to reminisce about that time. But are we really going to use those things again? So we probably shouldn't get so sentimental about something that it prevents us from getting rid of it when we know that it's just taking up space, that we're not going to use it, that we just are just holding on to it because we have these memories about it. And some things are fine to hold on to when you're really sentimental. You have photo albums and things like that. Okay, that's fine. But when it's something that is just like taking up space and you're never going to use it, you're probably not ever going to even look at it, and it's just back in your closet somewhere, just not serving any purpose at all. And so it just might be that time that we need to get rid of it, that we need to give it to someone else and prevent it from being clutter in our home any longer. And here's another tip. With ADHD, sometimes we do experience overwhelm, and it can be from just a lot of different things coming at us at once, and then we just get overwhelmed by the whole process of whatever we're doing, right? When you are trying to declutter, and if you're trying to declutter to make sure you sell everything that you're going to declutter, even if you're only going to sell a few things, just realize that selling is quite a process. It's, you got to get everything together, and then you got to price everything, and then you got to figure out, okay, how am I going to ship this out to somebody? Okay, well, where do I want to put this online? Do I want to have a garage sale? And then how am I going to exchange everything? How am I going to make sure I have a return policy? All this kind of stuff that you have to think about as you're trying to sell just stuff that you're trying to declutter. If you never actually sell that thing, like you just are waiting for the perfect sale and that person just never shows up, or you're just waiting for such a long time for that person to show up. So now all the stuff that we have decluttered and are ready to get rid of, we're then holding on to even longer as we wait for this person to make the sale and come and buy whatever that we are selling. And so that kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? Hey, we want to get rid of stuff. We want to get it out of our house, our home, our apartment, but we're then holding on to it, waiting for someone to come and be a customer for us to make sure that we can get money for that thing. Just realize if we're going to go through the process of selling something, just be prepared. Okay. It can take quite a long time, and the process can create some overwhelm because it is a lot to actually do just to sell one thing. And as long as you're okay with that process and waiting and going through that whole thing, then it's fine to go through and sell something. But on the other hand, if you don't want to deal with all that and you don't want to figure out and go through that whole process and realize it's a lot of work to actually do that, then you might want to think about, okay, do I want to give this to someone or donate it somewhere first before trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to sell everything, and then holding on to that clutter even longer as you wait for somebody to actually buy it. And here's another tip. A lot of times with ADHD, we might experience where we think everything has to be perfect, nothing can be out of place. It's called perfectionism, and we may experience that as we are decluttering. Hey, I've got to make sure that this little piece over here goes in this perfect place. And if I take that piece from over there, that piece of furniture, or move, that decor somewhere else, okay, it's got to be placed this very certain way. And because that's placed that certain way, then this has to be over here, and it can't be but 2 inches away from this other thing. And if it's not, I got to just get it to the right place, within those 2 inches over. And then now I got to go back and look at it. Oh, this other thing's not right. That whole process can take a very long time. And if you are dealing with perfectionism as you are decluttering, you may really never get done with it, or it may just take you such a long time to get done with it because we think that it must be perfect to where there's nothing out of place, to where we're made sure that we've completed everything with decluttering. We didn't leave anything off our list. We didn't make any mistakes. We want to make sure that it is done absolutely perfect with no errors at all. And so it's good to strive for perfection or just use that as a goal, but don't get to the point to where it's like, okay, it's got to be so absolutely perfect. I don't want to go and move on to something else. One of the favorite things that I've heard is, hey, done is better than perfect. So if you've got it and you're like, hey, this is really good enough, it doesn't need to be perfect, this is not going to be the last time that you declutter, right? You are going to have to clutter more times than just this one. So don't worry about it if it's not absolutely perfect. Do as much as you can to where you are satisfied with it, and then you can worry about the next time how much you want to do and how much is going to be good for you. But don't get into the trap of perfectionism while you are decluttering. And here's another tip. With ADHD, we do tend to procrastinate, and in this case, we procrastinate with actually taking the stuff that we've decluttered and getting it out of the house, taking that stuff to the donation center or giving it to somewhere else, take it over their house or home to make sure they get it. What happens is it sits by the door, or maybe we take it down to the car and you put it in the car, you leave it in the trunk of the car, and yes, outside of your house, but now it's just moved to the car, and now it's there for however long that you have it in there when you actually remember it. And then we figure out, oh, it's there. And then we actually take it to the donation place, hopefully, or if we get distracted again, it might stay in there even longer. So what you want to do is you want to have it to where you can see it to make sure that you are not going to forget it. And the other thing we can't do is to say, hey, I'm going to do that later. I'm not going to go ahead and do it right now. You want to do it as soon as possible that you can, because the longer you wait, the longer that you just put it off again and again. And then at some point, it turns into weeks and months and maybe even years. It's still in the same place and it's just become clutter again. It's just in a different area in your home that's become clutter in. Instead, what we need to do is make sure that whatever we have decluttered, we get it out of our home as soon as possible and figure out where we need to take it just as long as it's not in our house. And again, not stuck in our car either. And by the way, these are only the decluttering tips that help change my life. I do have organization tips that have done the same thing. And you can watch that video right now, right here on this channel.